The latest drought monitor and ENSO forecast were released earlier today. The weather for the upcoming weekend and your 7-day forecast next at the Weather Farm. Good evening and welcome to the Weather Farm. I'm Chief Meteorologist Christopher Hale with your local forecast for Hendricks County and the surrounding area. Here at the top of the hour at 10 o'clock, we had a temperature of 51 degrees. Skies were generally clear and the winds were calm. Looking around the 4-county region, we generally see temperatures in the low to mid 50s overnight at this hour. Yountsville, you've cooled down to 49. You're one of the cooler spots in the 4-county region. Lebanon, you're down to 51. Brownsburg, 51. Avon, you're holding on to 54. Temperatures will generally be in the mid 40s overnight in most areas. Taking a look at what our weather for today here at the Weather Farm, we had a high temperature of 72 degrees, which was exactly what we had forecasted if you caught our shorts video that we posted early this morning. Our low this morning was 45 degrees. Again, we've had no precipitation. We've had no precipitation over the first 10 days of October. And for our sunrise and sunset for Friday, October 11th, sunrise will be at 7:52 a.m. and the sun will set tomorrow night at 7:11 p.m. Take a look at the tropics. That's been an area of focus. Milton is now an extratropical system, and Leslie has been downgraded to a tropical storm. We have a couple of areas that we're watching off the African coast, and only one of them is expected to develop over the next 7 days. Looking at our hazards around the United States, the main area of focus, other than the aerial river flooding and coastal flooding down in Florida, is parts of Pennsylvania down into Maryland, West Virginia, and the far northern counties of Virginia. You guys are under a freeze warning tonight. Temperatures are going to be clear and dip into the upper 20s to low 30s across most of this area. Let's take a look at our weather over the next several days. Again, as it's been most of this week, the weather has been extremely calm. It's not until later this weekend that we start to see a short wave moving down out of Canada. It will generate a low pressure system that will then move into New England. If you look at the beginning of this loop again, it doesn't really generate much rain for us here in Indiana. It's not until later next week that this wave that's diving out of the Pacific Northwest a week from tonight starts to move across the plains. That looks to be our next best chance for rain. But again, it's not for at least 10 to 12 more days. Where we thought we might have some rain over the weekend, especially early Sunday morning with this little wave that's diving down, as you see, it keeps most of the rain across north central Indiana and into lower Michigan. And as a result, if we take a look at our precipitation over the next 5 to 7 days, we see here in Indiana, most of our precipitation, again, stays north towards the Indiana-Michigan border. The heaviest precipitation in southern Florida around Miami from Gulf moisture. And then that system that comes out of the Canadian prairies from Ontario dives down and then goes up into the New England. That's going to generate, it's going to pull a lot of moisture off the Atlantic, and it's going to generate some heavy rains and some snowfall for those areas. And we mentioned last night, as we get up into parts of Quebec and into Newfoundland and Labrador, they could see 2 to 5 inches of snow over the next 48 hours. Likewise, out across parts of British Columbia at those higher elevations, significant snow 1 to 2 feet can be expected by next Wednesday. And speaking of that snowfall, while that system that I talk about that it moves out and into the New England area early next week, this map does tend to want to overdo the snowfall estimates. I do believe it's a little bit early in the season. This particular model, the GFS or the American model, is kind of overplaying a little bit of the cold air that it expects to be in place there. So this will likely be more of a cold rain. But those higher elevations, the White Mountains, mountains of Vermont, you can definitely see snowfall down as low as 2,000 feet in elevation You get up into Quebec, into Labrador and Newfoundland, that's where you're going to see more of the mixing rain into accumulating snows in the amounts of 2 to 5 inches. Even here, it wants to put some snowfall here in the arrowhead of Minnesota, parts of the UP and northern Wisconsin. I just don't think that's going to come to fruition, but it is something that we will watch. Each model run we get every 6 hours gives us new information, and so we'll continue to watch this to see if any snowfall is expected in those parts this weekend. So if we take a look again at our weather here across the Great Lakes region, I'm going to show you a little bit closer view of that rain opportunity. You see it right there. It kind of just misses us here in Indianapolis, in central Indiana. The rain pretty much stays to the north, and then there's lake effect rain off of Lake Michigan Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of next week. So taking a look at our current temperatures around the region at the top of the hour, again, Indianapolis, you were sitting at 58, Lafayette 54. Cooler temperatures were off to our north and east, while looking out to our west, we see temperatures generally in the mid-60s. That warmth is going to slowly push its way to central Indiana on Friday, but we're not going to be this warm or have experienced the 80s and low 90s that were experienced across most of the plains earlier today. So taking a look at our forecast for tonight, we do expect clear skies here with calm winds. We will expect a low temperature at 45 degrees. Again, let's take a look at the overall pattern. It remains pretty much unchanged from last night. We have this ridge that's going to move into Indiana over the weekend. Then we're going to have a trough that's going to dive down from Manitoba and Saskatchewan. It's going to give us cooler than normal temperatures to start the middle part of next week. But when you look out to the west, there's that large ridge, and as it shifts to the east in advance of another deepening trough that's going to come into the Pacific Northwest, it's going to warm us back up Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of next week. Before the following weekend, when this trough, as we see, it's really digging down into the Four Corners region. It's going to be one of those classic ones that's going to then shoot up across the plains and through Iowa and Wisconsin. It's a typical track we see during this transition time, but it will allow cooler air to move into Indiana for a few more days. And then, just like I said last night, another ridge builds behind it. That ridge moves towards the east, and our temperatures warm again. So we go in this repetitive cycle, about 2 or 3 days of cooler weather, 3 or 4 days of warmer weather, 2 or 3 days of cooler weather. That will be the general pattern through the last week of October. So let's take a look at those temperatures. Again, Indianapolis, you're going to see a low temperature tonight of 52. Lafayette in the city, 50, but definitely, as I mentioned, away from the city and in those outlying areas, mid-40s will be common. For our Friday, we're going to see temperatures generally in the mid to upper 70s, 78 in Lafayette, 78 South Bend, and 78 in Evansville. For our Friday night football, Friday night lights, temperatures are going to be pretty much the same as they are tonight, generally in those mid-40s. For our Saturday, this will be our warmest day of the weekend. We're going to try to touch 80 degrees here in Indianapolis. We're not going to see these upper 80s and mid-80s we see across Missouri, because on Sunday, the cold front's going to make its way in. By midday, we expect a high of 74 degrees on Sunday. One of the things that also was released today, we had 2 bits of information. The first piece of information is the ENSO update. This determines whether or not we go into a La Nina pattern or an El Nino pattern. So I'm going to show you first the sea surface temperatures, and how we determine whether or not we're in a La Nina or an El Nino pattern is what are the equatorial waters doing. So if we look here, there's the equator, and we draw a straight line across the middle of this map. We see these blue blobs right through here. This is telling us that the equatorial waters in the Pacific Ocean are cooler than normal. We look up here in the Northwest Pacific, or just south of the Gulf of Alaska off the coast of Washington and Oregon, we see warmer than normal temperatures. But in the equatorial region, we see these cooler than normal temperatures. And that's exemplified here too in our CDAS Nino index. This, if everything was neutral, we'd be at 0. but that oscillation of it over the last several months has dipped further and further toward -1. If we're between values of -1 and 1, we say we're in an ENSO neutral environment. If we see values greater than 1 on either side, if it's -1, we're in a La Nina. And if it's greater than +1, we're in an El Nino situation. And then as the numbers go higher, it's either a light or a weak El Nino, a weak La Nina, a strong El Nino, or a strong La Nina. So right now, the latest value that was measured has this just a -0.0958. So we're right on that border of being ENSO neutral into a weak La Nina. The key fact that came out of the report today was that there's a 60% chance that the months of October, November, and December will be in a La Nina pattern. So what does that mean here for most of our weather? So if we look at La Nina, what that means is the Pacific jet comes as it normally does, but the polar jet is buckled way to the north across parts of Alaska. So we have a bunch of cool air just south in the Gulf of Alaska, and then it makes a dive across the Canadian prairies through the northern plains and just south along the Ohio River, and then back into the northeast. So when it combines with the Pacific jet, it produces wetter than normal conditions here in Indiana. But depending just how far this polar jet is north or south of our area, we could be warmer than normal, we could be colder than normal. Typically, we will see jabs of colder air in a La Nina pattern. If it times out that there's a system going with the Pacific jet that has moisture, that's when we can get some significant snows. If we're in a warmer environment, then it's going to be cold rain. But also because the moisture tends to stay a little bit further north, areas south and along Florida, along the Gulf Coast into Texas, they tend to be drier than normal. Which will be good news because they've received, especially in Florida, I think it was St. Petersburg, received 16 inches of rain yesterday from Hurricane Milton. We here in Indiana, we know that we're currently under a drought situation, so a wetter than normal pattern would be beneficial for us. And that's exactly what the drought monitor showed today in their latest update. Most of Indiana is in an abnormally dry situation, parts of moderate drought to the north. Here in central Indiana, here at the Weather Farm, most of Boone County, Hamilton, northern Marion County, we're in no drought situation at all, thanks to the beneficial rains a few weeks ago from Hurricane Helene, or the remnants of Hurricane Helene. So this is something we'll continue to watch. If that plays out and we're in a wetter pattern, that will definitely help alleviate the drought situation here in Indiana. Well, let's take a look at our 7-day forecast for our area. High temperature tomorrow at 76, Saturday 75, Sunday 75, and then upper 50s to start next week. Normals are in the mid 60s for this time of year. We hope you've enjoyed your time here at the Weather Farm. We hope to see you again real soon. Hey everybody, meteorologist Christopher Hale here at the Weather Farm. We hope you've enjoyed this video that we've put together tonight detailing the weather and what's happening here in central Indiana. If you like what you see or other content that you see on our page, go ahead and click that subscribe button that's right, I think it's down here. Or if you want to see other videos, click this little video that's up here to my left. We try to produce content for you that's relevant to you, highlights weather that's going on that will impact your daily lives. So again, watch other videos and subscribe wherever it is. And we hope to see you soon.